Peace and blessings, people. It's Dr. Bobby Price, your plant-based pharmacist and nutritionist, also author of Education Over Medication. And it has been almost 8 months since I posted a video here on YouTube. And so I want to give you a little bit of background to help you understand why it's been so long since I posted a video. You know, a lot has changed in these last 2 years since the pandemic has started. And that's partially why it's been so long. I posted a video. But one of the things that has changed a lot in these last 2 years was censoring. There's been a lot of censoring, especially around medical information over these last 2 years. We've literally gone from a country where we can speak freely and have options as to what we can do and choose to do with our bodies. Until now, we've almost gone into a society that we've quite often, been on the other end of telling countries what they should and shouldn't do in other countries, but now we're doing that here in the US. And so these last couple of months, I've been censored and shadow banned so much on social media to a point where I've done more live events as a result of that. And so, for a moment, I felt a little bit sort of powerless in my ability to speak on the topics that I wanted to speak on. And being that I have a very unique position in that, I've been on both sides of the fence. So I've worked for the FDA, the regulatory industry. I've also worked in a clinical setting in the hospitals. I've worked here in the US, I've worked abroad in Japan. And so I have a very unique perspective on modern medicine and a lot of experience. But in these last almost 8 years, I spent the majority of my sort of re-education and unlearning, learning more holistic ways to heal, using herbs, using holistic techniques. And so I literally have been on both sides of the fence. And now that I take a more holistic approach to healing, my message and my philosophies are sort of curtailed to that. And that doesn't always go along with the mainstream way of thinking. And not only with they, but also with colleagues as well. A lot of people don't agree with how I think around how we should heal and prevent disease. And I understand why they don't agree with how I think and what I believe, because we're not taught this in school. We're not taught proper nutrition. And when I say proper nutrition, I mean nutrition that's aligned with our nature and nature in and of itself. We're not taught things about herbs in school. We're not taught about holistic modalities like acupuncture. We're not taught about these things, Reiki healing and Reiki energy. We're not taught about those things. And so when you hear them being talked about and used in practice, quite often when healthcare professionals hear this, they think it's a bunch of, esoteric woohoo. And so I understand why they don't necessarily agree with me, and it makes sense. They don't have that education. And so it also makes sense when I, have conversations with people who have cancer, things like stomach cancer and colorectal cancer, and they ask their oncologist or their GI doctor, hey, should I eat anything different now that I have this diagnosis? And they tell them, no, there's nothing you can do about your diet. You can eat it whatever you want. So I also understand why they think the way they do too. And so with that being said, the one thing that I want people to sort of know and understand is that this is not a new thing, censoring. There's been a war on natural medicine, for the past 120 years. And what I mean by that is modern medicine in and of itself, the way we think about modern medicine with the FDA and drugs, that is really only about 110 years old. And most people don't know that. And so when we're having the discussion around what is treatment, what is healing, quite often that's the only option that it is discussed. is because there's been this war on natural healing for so long. And what I want to talk about today is what that war has looked like and how it began. And I want you to compare it to what we've been going through these last 2 years in this pandemic. And it'll help you see how in these last 2 years, that war effort has grown tremendously in the war against natural medicine. And so to give you a little bit of background on how modern medicine came to be, I'll first have to start with how medicine was always viewed. And what I mean by that is you can go back 10,000 years into Egypt and you'll see the Ebers Papyrus papers where there's natural remedies explaining how to use herbs and natural methods to heal people over 10,000 years ago. And then several hundred years later, you'll hear about Hippocrates telling people that you are what you eat and to use food as medicine. Okay. You can go even further down the line and see over and over the development of Ayurvedic medicine, the development of traditional Chinese medicine, the development of herbal medicine. All around the world, people using this. So I always tell people when you really look at it, traditional medicine that we call modern medicine today isn't traditional at all because again, it's only 110 years old. However, the natural medicine is actually traditional medicine because there's over thousands of 10,000 years of observational data that you can look at of us as humans using herbs, specific herbs, to heal certain modalities. So there's so much observational data, there's so much historical data that we can look at and compare when it comes to natural medicine. Again, over 10,000 years, we can look at that type of data. But here and again, we only have about 110 years of data as it relates to any type of sort of healing around modern medicine or drug therapy as we know it today. Okay. And so I wanted to give you that background. And I also want to say this as well. Most people don't know that, prior to the development of modern medicine as we know it today and the formation of the FDA, et cetera, pharmacists were looked at as healers, and people would quite often go into a pharmacy to receive herbal medications. Okay, so pharmacists have always been sort of a resource for healing. And the profession of pharmacy and medical doctor really it was really one at one point. Okay. And for the most part, most medical doctors and pharmacists use many of the same modalities. Now, if you go back into the 1800s and the 1700s, what you'll notice is that we were using medicine in the form of herbalism in very unique ways. And what I mean by that, if you were to go into the old apothecary or old pharmacy today and see some of the antique ways that they would use modern medicine, one of the ways that they would use it is by making soda and putting the medicine in the soda. And what I mean by that is you could sort of go back and look at what the original, drinks like ginger ale. Ginger ale, although it's just a drink that we buy in the store today, it was something that you would go into a pharmacy and get from a pharmacist who would take ginger and a few other things, put them in a concoction that they would call soda because they add a little bit of sugar to it. It tastes good because, all herbal medicine is bitter. A lot of it is bitter. And so they would add a little bit of sugar to this fizz or this carbonated water, add in the herbs to it, you drink it, you get the healing from it. Okay, so that's how a lot of these sort of herbal remedies began, especially in the 1700s and the 1800s. Okay, so you have like ginger ale. You also have things that develop like root beer. We know root beer as just this soda drink that we would drink, but root beer used to be a combination of herbs like sassafras and sarsaparilla, all of these herbs mixed in together. Okay, Dr. Pepper used to be one of those. Coca-Cola, even Coca-Cola, which was oddly, it used cocaine but it was used as an anti for anxiety. You understand? So, for years we've used, with the exception of Coca-Cola, we've used herbs to heal people. And, you know, in the early 1900s is when things really began to change. And they began to change because Rockefeller got involved with modern medicine, or got involved with medicine. And Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, was a oil magnate. So he owned a company called Standard Oil, which was essentially a monopoly on the oil industry because he owned about 90% of the oil industry. And when monopolies became illegal, the company got broken down into several companies that we know today as Chevron, Exxon, and Mobil. Okay. Now, when these companies got broken down, John Rockefeller was trying to figure out how he could get his hands into modern medicine or into the health field. And one of the things that he discovered in his own business, which was oil, was the scientists were discovering that many of the vitamins that we know today were being discovered in oil products. Okay. Now, I know that sounds really odd, but they were discovering certain vitamins. So, the first vitamin that was discovered was vitamin A. The second vitamin that was discovered was vitamin B, and so on and so on. And so when he discovered these vitamins in these petrochemicals, he saw an opportunity in his mind where we can use oil or the byproducts or the waste products of oils to create these things that could be sold to people in healthcare. Okay. And so in an attempt to figure out how to get involved in the medicine, he went to Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie linked him up with a guy who created what is known today as the Flexner report. Now, the Flexner report by itself alone changed everything that we know in the medical industry. This report essentially was the cause of almost 50% of all medical schools closing in the US and pretty much 90% of all Black medical schools closing in the US. Okay. And essentially what the idea of the report was to centralize medicine and also to make sure that the only things that would be handed out from practitioners of medicine was going to be patented drugs. Okay. And that was one of the things that Rockefeller really put his money into because he donated about $100 million. So think about this, him donating $100 million in the early 1900s. Now, I don't have a figure of what that would be worth today, but I can pretty much assure you that that will be close to somewhere near, if not $1 billion, at least close. And so he put $100 million into this. Okay. And part of what that $100 million was going to do was act as grants for these schools who were willing to practice medicine in the way that the Flexner report said that they should practice medicine. Okay. And one of the primary schools that were used as an example was Johns Hopkins University. Okay. And so schools that were compliant with practicing medicine in the way that the Flexner report told them that they should practice medicine, these are the schools that got funding. The schools that refused to practice medicine in that way, and what I mean by practice medicine in the way that the Flexner report wanted them to, and I'm surmising, but essentially what it wanted them to do was remove everything natural. Okay, no using herbs, no using Reiki healing, no using chiropractic, no using acupuncture, no using anything holistic. The only thing that you can use were these patented drugs. Okay, and as a result, this new wave of thinking around healing began. Okay, because now all new practitioners were coming into the wave of, when I prescribe therapy only through drugs, as opposed to prior to this timing, You can use multiple sort of modalities to heal, whether it be sun therapy, sitting out in the sun, whether it be changing the diet, whether it be, mental therapy, whatever it may be. Before there was this sort of holistic approach to healing, and now it was only use drugs, use therapies, only approved through the Flexner report. And schools became almost obligated to follow this because many of them were bankrupt, by having to create new laboratories at their school, bankrupt by having to create new standards at their school that they weren't able to uphold, because a lot of the student attendance dropped as well, because there was also new standards, which were, and I will admit, is pretty good. There were new standards on what it would take to become a practitioner. Okay. And so it made it very difficult, and it made it damn near impossible to include natural therapy in the hospital setting. Okay. And this is how the war on medicine truly began. And the reason why it was a war on medicine is because of this. It's not that the natural therapies didn't work. It was the real issue was that natural therapies are cheap. And what I mean by that is all drugs have to be patented. You can't patent anything that is natural. You understand that? You can't patent anything that is natural, that is of nature. But what you can do is take a chemical, let's say in a plant called foxglove. Okay, you take the active ingredient that is inside of foxglove that, let's say for instance, you could use foxglove, a plant, for a heart arrhythmia or for a heart effect. Okay. And what you would do is, instead of using foxglove, which back in the days somebody could easily go into the back of their yard and find, or on a farm and find, for cheap. Now what you do is you take the active ingredient that causes the effect or the therapeutic effect, and you create a synthetic version of it. And that synthetic version, because it's not real, because it's not nature, can actually be patented. And then you can call it a drug. And now you can sell this for whatever you want to sell it for because it's your patent. Okay? That's essentially where the war on drugs began, because of the issue or the difference between something that is natural, you can go find out in nature, that's cheap, okay, versus something that is synthetic and is a knockoff version of plants, because most drugs were made from plants. They just were the synthetic derivative of those plants. Okay. Now I'm having this conversation with you today to help you understand why there's been so much censorship, as it relates around medical information today. What has become very popular in the last couple of years is using food as medicine. People like Dr. Sebi and others have made it popular, and not only popular, but trendy, to use food as medicine, to use herbs as medicine. And because it's become so popular and so widely accepted, whereas in the past, like you mentioned, using food as medicine, people would laugh you out of the room. But now you actually have real life examples of people changing their diets and literally reversing conditions in their bodies. And so because it's become so popular, now this war on natural medicine has grown and become inflamed. And so influencers like myself and others are sort of being shadow banned, and unfortunately being sort of put at the lower end of the total pole when it comes to organic reach, as opposed to the last couple of years. I would be getting 3, 4, and maybe 5,000 followers a month. Now I'm only getting 500 or 1,000 followers a month. But what's important for you to know and understand is that, real recognize real. The nature that we eat and consume, that we use as medicine in the form of herbs, in the form of food, when it comes into contact with our bodies recognize it. And not only does it recognize it, it's capable of absorbing it. Okay? Not only is it capable of absorbing it, it's capable of utilizing it. Okay? And that is what is the major key. When the body recognizes something and it's made for the body, it's made to heal the body, and it does heal the body, then that becomes direct competition for something that not only isn't made to heal, because drugs aren't made to heal, they're made to treat. And there's a huge difference between treatment and actually curing and healing. Okay. And so I thought this would be a perfect video for me to sort of start posting. I want to be consistent more on YouTube. So, you know, I see the comments that you guys have posted on the other videos. And I want to make sure that I come in here a little bit more with you guys. So keep me inspired in the comments if this is the kind of content you love, so that you can have a better understanding of why is it so difficult for me to get this kind of information from a healthcare practitioner. In many cases, it's not their fault. They don't teach us this kind of information, okay? And the reason that I'm explaining to you why they don't teach us this kind of information is because of everything I explained before with Rockefeller, the Flexner report, and all of the changes that happened to medical institutions, from medical schools to hospitals, you know, back in the early 1900s. Again, my journey is that I went from pills to plants. I use food as medicine to heal myself of high blood pressure. I was diagnosed with high blood pressure when I was 16. I lived with it for 12 years. And after 12 years, I realized that I needed to do something about it, or I was going to die early death. And out of desperation, I tried a plant-based diet. It healed me. It not only normalized my blood pressure, but it got rid of the inflammation in my body. You know, it got rid of the brain fog. It boosts my energy. It slimmed my waist. It slimmed my whole body, to be honest with you. And you can't get one medication that can do two of those things, let alone all of those things at once without any side effects. And so that's why I named my book Vegetation Over Medication, is because I truly believe that food as medicine is the foundation, not only for maintaining your health and keeping your health, but also for reversal of certain conditions in the body. Okay? So I hope you have enjoyed this. If you have enjoyed the information, make sure you like and subscribe and check out the other videos on the page. I'll try to be more consistent. Again, give me some comments below if you love the information that I'm giving you guys. Also, tell me what kind of videos you want to see in the future. That'll be really dope too. So until the next time, peace and blessings and Godspeed.